So, ladies and gentlemen, let's meet our next speaker for today. And it's Inji Barai, the founding partner of Acumen Consulting. She's going to be speaking about how to create a minimal, viable product and define the right operating business tool. Now, Inji is a seasoned economist and management consultant with over 13 years of experience in both fields. And this afternoon, she's going to be speaking on the subject of secrets to startup successes. Ladies and gentlemen, please warmly welcome Inji Barai.
Corey has made this a very tough act to follow, but I'm going to attempt to do so. So let me tell you a little about our company. Sandra and I own a startup. So if anyone else here in the house owns a startup, that makes all of us. And our startup focuses on helping small and medium enterprises. So that's the premise that we've come from. And over the course of the last year, we've been using tools that we learned at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and through reading some interesting business books that keep popping up on the top 10 business books to read that year, to try and find a tool that would help startups and SMEs in the Middle East try and figure out what's the right operating model for them. So looking around the room, or looking around life as we know it at the moment, you'll notice that more and more companies are competing on non-traditional means of competition. It's gone beyond competing to offer you the best possible price or the highest possible quality. Companies are now competing on convenience. They're competing on operating models. So hence it's becoming more and more imperative for you to make sure that your operating model caters to your target customer segment in the best way possible. So I'm going to take you through a few battles to see if those strike a chord with you, to try and make sure we're all on the same page when we say operating model. So how many people Ubered here this morning? None? Oh, okay, one. Uber and Relay Rides. Relay Rides is a much less known name here in the Middle East, but basically both these companies seek to address the same customer need. They're both trying to get you from point A to point B, but they each are doing it very differently. They're both platform models, which is a trend nowadays. So instead of owning the assets, people are basically connecting those who own the assets to those who need to use the assets. So this platform model is becoming a growing trend. Each of these is utilizing the notion of a platform model, but each is doing it very differently. What Uber is doing is it's allowing you to reach a population of drivers with their cars who can pick you up and drop you off. Relay Rides, on the other hand, lets you rent other people's cars to use for as long as a year, if that's available for that long. So rather than take a ride from one point to another, you can actually rent the car of your dreams, should it be available at the next corner. Sometimes the operating model that the companies pitch actually has to do with building a culture around what it is you're offering. So rather than having a traditional gym that people go to, what CrossFit is trying to do is make anywhere a gym. It's becoming culture, a cult, an inside joke. Oh, you're a CrossFitter too. So it becomes a sense of belonging, a sense of tribe. So it's overcoming the competition, and it's able to compete in a very intensive space by building a sense of loyalty attributed to a lifestyle that we all share. At other times, the operating model or the value proposition that the companies are claiming is a bit of a corporate social responsibility pitch. So companies are saying, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Mom, but Mom is a platform in Egypt that allows you to, if say you're a stay-at-home cook and you think you're a good cook, so you come up with a menu, you upload this menu online, and then for all the lovely young working millennials who don't have time to cook, they can log on, pick a menu they like, order food for the whole week, and it gets delivered to your doorstep. So once again, it's a platform model. Versus EasyPan, which is another startup in Egypt. It's targeting newlyweds, basically. So you want to learn to cook? We're going to help you learn to cook. Every day, we're going to ship you a recipe. We're going to ship you pre-portioned ingredients, all the spices you're going to need, very detailed instructions, and a photo of what the end result should look like. And you're on your own. So both of these people are trying to feed you, but each of them is doing it very differently. Global trends are also impacting the science of selecting operating models. So you find more and more the notion of crowdsourcing defining how we do business. So whether this crowdsourcing is human resources that we're trying to get together, whether it's finances. So people like Kickstarter and Indiegogo are giving Silicon Valley a run for its money. One last trend I want you to think about is, for all the Souq users, is the extent to which e-payment, PayPal, digital payments are affecting the retail industry at large. So you find the big box retailers shifting towards something they call omni-channel. So they're having to change their business model and their operating model just because to keep up with platform websites that are selling online. So an omni-channel model basically allows you to browse online, select a product, figure out if you like it, tells you where the closest store is. You go to the store, you actually take a hold of it. While at the store, you can use your cell phone to scan the QR code. Tells you what your friends from social media think about that particular product. So all of a sudden, you have an interactive means of interfacing with that retailer across different platforms constantly all the time. So how many people here own a business or are dreamers? They have a business idea. Wow, lovely. Okay, so for those who are evaluating their businesses or who are thinking, does my dream actually have a chance of making it into reality? I want you to think of the following model. Think of it as a test. We're going to take your idea through 3 tests today. We call it the triple V model. Test number 1 is it value creating? If your idea is not value creating to its target customer, it will never take off the ground. Test number 2, and this is important because just because it passed test number 1 doesn't make it a business just yet. It could be a lovely charity. Is it financially viable? Will it bring home the bacon? And finally, does it have valid business logic? And this is the one people overlook the most. So what does this really mean? When I say value creating, what am I expecting here? I need to make sure that my business idea and my operating model is differentiated enough. It creates value in a way that makes it distinctive from everybody else in the market. So if you're starting this company or this business to do what other people have been doing for tens of years in the exact same way, then you might as well not start that business because you're fighting against established norms without bringing enough value to the table to entice customers to switch from what they find tried and true to this new business idea. So in order to do so, in order to create that value, to find the right differentiator for you, you need to think about customer gains. What can I do, or what can I bring to the table to entice that customer to shift from what they've been using to my product or my service? And the best way to do it is to have a very solid understanding of what are the competition offering. You need to have a very detailed analysis of what each person in that space is doing and what each person in a tangent space is doing, because it's amazing what you can borrow from adjacent industries. So when doing so, I want you to think about things like the price, your pricing strategy, the extent to which the channels that you're using, the quality, the variety, the extent to which you're customized. Sometimes the value proposition is, or the edge of the value creating edge is, I let the customers co-design the product with me. They're involved at an earlier stage. So how you interface with your customer and the varying touch points are a critical part of your value creation cycle. The second aspect within value creation is you need to be value creating across the various aspects of the value chain. You need to be competitive. In order to be competitive, you need to think of 2 aspects. What am I going to outsource and what am I going to do in-house, especially with the whole crowdsourcing movement? But you have to keep in mind that whatever you decide to do in-house should be your core operations. This is the part where the IP exists. This is the part where you're going to be very different than the competition. So your core business or your core competitiveness has to stay in-house. Everything else you can afford to outsource. I know companies who outsource almost all of their supporting functions, and at times even their sales. You find a company like Apple owning only the design aspect of the business, with everything else being manufactured in other places, being shipped in other places, being procured in other places. Maybe the marketing as well still being done out of HQ, but other than that, anything that they do not perceive as core, they outsource. The last thing, to make sure that it is value creating, is I need you guys to think of 2 different spheres that you're going to analyze. And for this cycle, the notion of market research becomes very valuable. I think market research is very underappreciated in the Middle Eastern context. The amount of insights that you can get out of surveys, out of focus groups, out of actually talking to your customer are overwhelming. So when talking to your customers, I want you to determine 2 different things. The first thing is, what's the adoption cycle like in this industry or in very similar industries? Who are the champions that I need to nail to get on board to make sure that I deliver on this product or service? Who are going to be my advocates? Who are my geek squad in another sense? Who are the people who are going to go out there and beta test this and talk to the world about it and actually use your referral codes to get more people onto your platform? So once you understand the adoption cycle, that's a very strong contributor. On the other side, you need to understand what are the key purchase drivers. You'd be amazed at how many purchase decisions are being made by people other than the people you think are the responsible person. So you see a couple go shopping because they're getting married. Who's actually making the decisions of what refrigerator we buy? Believe it or not, it's the bride's mom, probably, as per market research. So you need to understand where's the key purchase drivers. Are they driven by price? Are they driven by convenience? What makes people buy what they want to buy? And by ranking these key purchase drivers and having very solid understanding of them and mapping it against an adoption cycle, you'll be able to define your go-to-market strategy. What are you going to do? What's your business development approach? What are you going to do to get this product on the shelves or to get it in people's hands? So congratulations, your ID passed phase 1. So now we need to vet it to make sure it isn't a charity. We need to make sure this is actually going to help you survive and you can actually quit your day job and do this full time. So is it financially viable? Financial viability is very simple. It comes down to the money. So what are my revenues and what are my costs and is it worthwhile? So from a revenue perspective, beyond whether or not this market is growing and whether or not this market is attractive, the key here is to define your revenue streams correctly. And there are multiple ways to do it. And the most successful companies actually use a combination of different types of revenue streams. But is it a transactional finance model? Do people pay at the point of transaction? Or is it a freemium model? Is it an app that I download and then if I want additional services, I actually pay extra for these additional services? Is it a subscription model? Do I pay monthly irrespectively of how many units I consumed? So once you have an understanding of what your revenue streams are, you'll have a better understanding of what your business is. Sandra and I mentor startups all the time, and one of the biggest challenges we face with them is they come up to you and they have this brilliant idea and they're so passionate about it. And you ask them, so how are you going to make money off it? No, we haven't figured that out yet. Like, but that's very important. And then you hear things like, oh, we're going to sell advertising space. Okay, so who's going to buy advertising space on this platform? No, we'll figure that out later. No, you have to figure that out now, because otherwise this business is never taking off the ground. On the other side, I want you to look at your costs. And in our experience, most SMEs in our world don't do their costing correctly, so you end up with unprofitable SKUs on shelves and being sold to customers. And part of the reasons they don't do costing correctly is a lot of them are still working out of garages, shared space, etc. So whenever they try and price the product, they only factor in the raw material costs. Very rarely do we find people who factor in the rent of the space that they're using, especially if it's their own apartment. So why do I have to factor in the rent? I'm paying the rent anyways. Hey, you're paying the rent anyways today, but eventually this is going to move out and it's going to have rent, and that must be factored into your pricing. Their own time rarely gets factored in. And when it does factor in, they price it very creatively. So there has to be some sort of benchmarks where you can look at the opportunity cost of the hour you spend on your own business versus being employed elsewhere and figure out how am I going to price my time as part of that product. So once you have a solid understanding of your cost breakdown, the next step is to have an understanding of the unit profitability. Am I profitable at a single product level? Am I profitable for all the products that I'm trying to offer or for all the services that I'm going to offer? And the magic term here keeps being unit economics. I need to make sure I'm profitable at a unit level. And that entails figuring out what's the volume that I need to manufacture or produce or volume of service that I need to deliver in order for me to reach that profitability. And when doing so, I need to look at financial metrics such as payback period. Most startup owners or SME owners are looking for some sort of exit strategy. I want some mega private equity firm to come in and buy a stake in my company. So if that's going to happen, they're going to ask you about the financial metrics. That's what they're looking at. They want to see how many times they're going to make their money back by investing in you. So you have to be very solid on your financial metrics and have a clear idea of what the numbers are today and how these numbers are going to grow over time with every decision that you make. The final V, and this is one people often overlook, is this ID solid from a business logic perspective? So what does that mean? So let's explore an idea for a moment. Let's imagine a world where the Philips R&D team have invented the light bulb that never goes off. So imagine that's a light bulb that lives forever. So over the first 2 or 3 years, Philips is going to sell like they have never sold before, and the competition is going to completely die out, and they're going to completely dominate that space. But what happens in year 4? I've actually cannibalized myself out of an industry because the business logic for this idea was not valid. It did not have a positive reinforcement spiral. Versus, if you take something like Airbnb, what they do is, the better the service, the more people use it, the more business they have in the future. Because if I have 100 people who are logging on to get property through the system, that encourages some people to list their properties. And then I have more options, so I'm more likely to use it. And the more people who are using it, the more people who are enticed to register their properties. So I end up with a positive reinforcement spiral that's good for the business. So that's valid business logic. Whatever your business idea is, you need to define it in a way or find the operating model that has the best positive reinforcement spiral for you. The second aspect of business logic is the agility part. You can invest millions of dollars on code development and then have to pivot your business. How much of this is still reusable and how much just went completely down the drain? So you have to prioritize your investment in startup mode in a sense that gives you the maximum number of options in terms of pivoting. So start with the ones that are the most versatile or the most flexible, rather than the ones that you perceive as quick wins at the start. So in doing so, you ensure that your business logic is valid, that the idea is sustainable, and that the business actually goes somewhere. Okay, so beyond operating models, last slide. So once this framework that we just went through, you can use two ways. You can use at the very start and during your planning phase to figure out which operating model to use, so to evaluate between different operating models. The other way you can do it is if you're thinking about